Good day, class. Now, today we're going to be talking about the railroads during the Industrial Revolution, the monopolies that came to be, and basically two of the men who became known as the richest men in America and still today are known as, quite simply, some of the richest men in America of all time. Um, So before we begin, just like the last couple of videos I've been making, you might hear some noise in the background. That's my neighbors, and again, I got uh, a main road just to the side of me over here. So you may hear some cars honking, going fast, things like that. So I do apologize for that. I am going to try to edit that stuff out as much as possible. So just bear with me, okay? Um, so right now, what you should have is either your packet or some sheet of paper to do the work. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we begin with the warm up, you may notice something different if you've been watching these videos. And if you look at the bottom right hand corner, you'll see me at the video going on. And the reason that is because some students told me that they wanted to see me for some reason. I have no idea why. So if this helps, cool, I guess. I don't know why they requested this video, but you know, I have no problem putting the video on if it helps you guys out. Okay. So here's a warm-up. Now, just like all the other videos before and the warm-ups we've done before, you guys know the drill. What do you see? Look at this picture, analyze it, break it down. What do you see from this picture? So write that down as question number one. List the things you see. The second question is, what do you think is happening? Judging from what you see all around this particular picture, what do you think is happening? What is the artist trying to say? Okay, so take a minute or so, a couple minutes to really look at this picture and then answer the two questions. Now, to the notes. Before the Civil War, there was 35,000 miles of railroad tracks. Now, the thing you have to remember is the railroad tracks did not go in a straight line. What they did was they curved, they went up and down hills, around mountains, things like that. So it was 35,000 miles, but it wasn't straight necessarily. But by 1900, that had stretched from 35,000 to 200,000 miles from coast to coast. Now, years before Lincoln was assassinated, he signed the Pacific Railway Act. Now, what this did was it had two companies basically competing with one another to try and meet up and basically connect the country. Both companies fought very hard to basically do more lines and then meet. And that's what ended up happening. At Promontory Summit, Utah, on May 10th, 1869, the lines met up. And when that ended up happening is there was a gold and silver spike that they used to hold down the rails. They were hammered in by dignitaries to signify the completion of the railways and to connect the two coasts together. Okay, now this was huge. And if you look to the picture on your right, you can see the picture of the two trains meeting from east and west. And if you look, yeah, there's a couple guys shaking hands, but if you look to the train, one guy has a bottle of what could be like wine or whatever, and the other guy is holding like a mug or a cup. Okay, so it was a big thing back then. And if you look below next to the webcam picture, you can see the golden spike. Okay, so yeah, you cannot just go over there and take it. They already took it out and it's in display now in Utah. Now the thing is, now that the trains are complete from coast to coast And now that it's basically finished, the trains can now make money. Now, the reason and the way they did this was pretty unique. The trains made money by how much cargo it weighed and how far it was going. See, the thing is, if let's say redwood trees that we talked about in class, um, they are big, large trees. So let's say they were going from California to, let's say, New York, which is some 3,000 miles away, a little bit more. Um, what they would do is they would charge by how much it weighed and how far it was going. Okay, now they charge by the mile and they charge by the ton, and those trees weigh a good amount of weight. So it would cost them quite a bit of money, whoever was buying the trees over there. So they had to compensate for that, how much it would cost for the cargo to be traveled over. Now that still goes on to this day, believe it or not. But the rates are different. It's not like how it is, or how it was back then. Now, with new lines being created and connecting the coast, um, there was another thing that happened that drove down the cost of transporting things from one side of the country to the other. One of them was the improvement of the locomotives. They could now go faster, they could pull more, and they were built better. So the thing is, the the average price of a ton dropped from 2 cents a mile to actually 3/4 of a cent per mile. Now, when I say 3/4 of a cent, that means not just 1 penny. That means 3/4 of a penny. So less than 1 penny per mile. Really, that drove down the cost quite a bit. Now, the U.S. government, in order to kind of prevent um, uh, progress, prevent any type of disruption whatsoever, they awarded the railways land grants. Now, these land grants basically let the railroad just have the land wherever they need it, and they would basically consider it eminent domain. And if you remember from the Constitution, basically the government can take that land, but they have to pay you. Okay, and that's what they did. Just here's a couple bucks for your inconvenience and move out of the way. Um, so that's what they did, and that's how really the railroad business made a lot of money from that because they were given a lot of land. It was basically the size of New England, um, New York, and Pennsylvania combined. Is how much land they were given during that time. They had to buy really anything. So that's like free land they got. Now, this type of incident, where they're giving land, basically really rubbed the citizens the wrong way. And what ended up happening is there was a lot of citizens who believed that the railway owners had swindled the investors, swindled the taxpayers. They bribed um, government officials, local and federal level, and that they had cheated on their contracts and debts. Now, one of the most famous um, railway people at that time, his name was Cornelius Vanderbilt, but he had a nickname called the Commodore. Okay, uh, he was a tough man, very very tough man. Uh, but thing is, he and his fellow railway people, which you see on the picture to your right, were known as robber barons. Now, not every railway builder was a quote unquote robber baron. Some of them were very legitimate. Some of them didn't take government money. They paid for things their own selves. Um, but that was rare. Now, thing is, you have to remember, bribery happened a lot during this time. And that's because a lot of the state and government officials, they were basically entangled. They were in on the funding of the railroads. So what basically, if the railroad went under, if the railway did not make money, they lost money as well because they invested money. They saw that this project was going to make money, so they put their own money in it. So if it failed, they lost money, which nobody wants to do, you know. So that's why a lot of corruption was happening. Now, here is your midpoint question. What are some advantages of purchasing stocks? Stuff in the stock market. Apple, McDonald's, Starbucks. I'm sure you've heard on the news or at least seen or heard about stocks. So, what are some advantages to buying stocks and why? What are the advantages? The other part is, what are some disadvantages to buying stocks? Um, and the things you have to remember, not all stocks are like a dollar. Some of them, which are big, like let's say Disney, to buy one share, one stock share, it could be as high as in the hundreds, like $120 for one share. And they have like thousands of shares. So, what do you think? Okay, so answer the question with a realistic rationale. Okay, and there's a writing prompt on the bottom, the advantages and then disadvantages to purchasing stocks is, and then you give your reason and why. Why is that so big? Why is that so important? Okay, so remember, you're doing two, an advantage and then the disadvantage, and both of them need a why. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and then on the next video, we'll be doing the second half of the notes.